See, as long as the users are not complaining, as long as it is not affecting the business, they're not going to invest money in it. In theory, we always want to do lots of research, but in practice, it's not so much the case. Most of the designers do not attach case study at all, and I straight away reject that person.
Hi, Mani. So good to have you back here with us. And of course, our last video was a super success, and people learned a lot from your B2B journey and your B2B experience. And now that you have grown in a lot of roles and you have had more level of experience, I want to start by understanding what does a typical day of a designer in a B2B industry look like?
So, see, it's not the most exciting, right? I would say, most of the time it's very boring. You sit there, you do meetings with lots of people, you get to know a lot of folk, and then there is a tiny bit of portion when you get to the goods where you design the stuff and you get into your zone, and you do the work, and then you, for like 3-4 hours, you see your design again and again, you click on your prototypes, right? You become obsessed with it, and then you scrap it all out. So that's how a typical goes like. But as soon as I progress to the senior roles, it is more taken up by meetings rather than just thorough design.
All right. So, since you mentioned that, a lot of boring time is spent with talking to people and stakeholders, I am very curious to understand what are the kinds of stakeholders that you work with on a day to day basis.
See, there are different range of stakeholder, right? There are product owners, then there are seniors. Say in several scenarios, there are also security people who enforce lots of constraints on you, right? And then also there are the user groups that are there. So there are different stakeholders. It's not just your end user, like how many people imagine. It's different people have different types of stakes in your product, right? So you have to talk to all of them, right? And you have to get them on a common agreement or a common platform, right? If we categorize it like simply how I used to do it previously, it's business, it's technology, and it's user. So there are three intersections you have to collide together to make a beautiful.
Okay, since you also mentioned about the fact that there are business and then there are end users. What does typical end users in a B2B industry really look like?
Let's take an example of a banking platform. Say we are creating a platform which will be used by a banker, right?
Right.
A typical banker. So then your typical user group will look like the SBI employee who refused to do your work because of the lunch break.
Right. Okay.
Right? But see, in any B2B industry, the typical users look like an employee, right? Whatever that industry is and their employee, how do they do their work? Your typical user will look like that person.
Right. Makes sense. So, do you have a lot of research involved in your process when you make designs?
To be honest, not as much as I want to, right? In theory, we always want to do lots of research, but in practice, it's not so much the case. In our scenario, we did a lot of improvisation in terms of, say, doing our research, how we do those things. It is not a typical like by the book scenario. We just grab any chance we can do, right? So to give you an example, we had these training sessions with our user groups or the bankers, you can say, when we were creating the product, and we used to grab those opportunities to get the feedbacks from those people, right? And then have those one-to-one interaction, that okay, where you are having the issues, what your day-to-day process looks like, and they would come up with lots of issues like, okay, I'm not able to do this thing, or I used to do this thing this way, but now it is very complicated for me. And then they also, it's always very interesting to see the people rant to you, right?
Yeah.
That maybe their job sucks, or maybe they are overworking, or and xyz things are happening with them, and on top of that they have to put up with your interface,
Yeah, of course.
right? So it's always great to see those things, and then like, okay, I'll try not to make life of this person difficult. I'll try to solve it, right? I'll try to work around that particular person's workflow. So that's how I would say we do the research kind of part, like in a very creative way, not in a traditional sense where you do research and that kind of thing.
That makes sense. But I'm also very curious to understand, say, like you mentioned, those bank employees are your users in most cases. So when you actually walk up to that sort of a user, what is their first reaction? Are they like happy about you researching with them, or is it the other way around?
So actually, we do not go with the agenda of say, and they do not know that we are doing the research.
Oh,
We are there for training purposes, right? We are training them for the platform that you are going to use, right? And in
Right.
any say when you have this scale of product and when you are implementing in such a way, there is always some kind of trainings and those things are involved. So we go by the by that framework that we are going for the training, right? And we are there to hear from them that if they are facing any problem, and we'll teach them, we'll show them how to do this. And in that process we try to find out like, okay, what
Right.
are the some serious problem. Let's say if somebody is coming up to us and saying that I'm not able to understand this. Okay, but if 10 people come to us, 20 people come to us, 40 people come to us and say the same thing, we know there is a problem.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Makes
So
sense.
it's not that they say, okay, you have come for research, now I'm not going to tell you anything. It's more like we are coming to teach here, so they tell us all their problems in advance.
Right. So, like you mentioned that, you usually show them the designs you're going for, either training or showing them. You have more of a show and tell with them, right? So, before making these designs in the first place, do you even do research at that stage?
Yeah.
Is it a
So
possibility?
yeah, definitely. See, before that, how you do is you just sit with some folks, right? And you ask them like, what is your process, right? You can ask a very common question: what day in your life look like, right?
Right.
How do you go about your day, right? And they'll tell you like, I have like somebody sitting at a loan approval window, right? They'll tell you that people are coming with haphazard documents. I have to send them back, and then they
Right.
complain outside that, okay, he sent me 10 times, right? But what's my issue in this, right? So they'll tell you all about their process.
So, do
how
you
they
do
have to
this
go.
undercover kind of a thing?
I feel like I do, but it's not actually that.
They
It's
know you're
not as
researching?
interesting as it sounds.
Okay.
Right? It's very simple conversation. Honestly, it's not like any, and I don't want to glorify it in any way. It's very simple conversation. Like you and me, we are having a conversation, right? It's as simple as that. It's nothing overcomplicated, nothing like that.
That makes sense. So, my next question to you is, what does a typical design process in general looks like when you work in a B2B industry?
So first, I want to break down the word typical. Say it is not typical at all, right? And every time
Sure.
you work on some project, right, there are different dynamics.
Right.
First, your team, your whole process, how you are doing things, kind of stakeholders involved, right? Kinds of user group you are dealing with, right? So there is nothing typical about it. Everything is tailored to say that environment, right? So every time you go into a new project or every time you start a new project, right, the things get tailored around that, right? So you start by asking the simple questions: what I'm here to do, who are the people who are involved, I'm going to do this project with, right? And then you start by learning the process of the existing users, how they are doing their work currently. And
So,
then
does that even happen within the same industry? So, let's say you were working in fintech.
yeah,
So, even when you change companies within fintech, does that happen?
I would say even in the same company, like not changing the company, same company, different project, it changes.
It's tailored.
To give you an example, at one point of time, we were working on a platform which is like the banker interface or the lender interface. And then we shifted, right, to do a sort of microfinancing product, right? And in that, you have like three parties involved.
Okay.
Actually, four, but like three parties. One is the bank, second is the microfinance institution that is running the show, and third, the agents of those microfinance institutions, right? And the fourth one is the user who doesn't have any interface or anything. So now your process change. Now you have to work around that. So
Yeah.
your typical definition would change: how you would be working, who you would be talking to, and how you would be designing it.
Absolutely, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Each time with each project, there is this tiny bit of complexity, even when that adds, or even there is a constraint that adds every time you have a different scenario, and now you have a whole new way of dealing with that scenario. So, Mani, can you help me understand why do most of the B2B products have a terrible UX?
Can you give me an example?
Let me think about it. You've worked in the B2B industry. Can you help me with some examples here?
See, I can give you good examples, right? You have Zira, you have Excel, you have whole family of Atlassian products. You have GitHub, you have Slack,
No, but
Teams.
these are the ones which have decently good UX. I'm talking about products
Yeah,
like,
let's come to that. There are bad products as well, right?
yeah,
You can experience those in maybe your payrolls, right? Maybe some
yeah, HR,
CRMs are
HR
there.
staffing.
CRMs are
Yeah,
there, right?
yeah.
Which are not properly being looked at, and they have terrible UX design, right?
Yeah. In fact, I have had to deal with a lot of company internal portals where you don't know what is happening, you don't know where to click. If there is an error, you don't get pop-ups, you don't,
So
that sort of
so
terrible
that
UX.
means that all of the B2B product are not bad.
Mm-hmm.
The product in which they have not put emphasis on design, emphasis on UX are bad, right? And if you go back, rewind, say 10 years ago, or let's say 5 year ago, even,
Yeah.
you will see that lots of B2B product had that state. That design was not being emphasized, the UX was not being emphasized in those products. That's why their UX was bad. But now the scenario has changed a lot. You have
Mm-hmm.
seen that recently lots of B2B product have been redesigned, like
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Microsoft Suite. Teams
Right,
have been
right, right.
redesigned like
Yeah, yeah.
a lot, right? So the companies and the B2B product owners are realizing this thing, that now the UX have caught up and they have to start making effort to make their B2B product more user friendly.
Right. That makes sense. So, where do you think the future of probably these internal overlooked products lie?
See, as long as the users are not complaining, as long as it is not affecting the business, they are not going to invest money in it, right? Even if it is an internal product, even if it is an external product or anything. Let's say there is an organization of like 2000 employees or XYZ, and they have an internal product going on, and everybody is using it happily. Nobody is saying anything. They'll not invest any money into it. But
And what
once,
happens during the times employees complain, but it's
yeah,
not a big deal
yeah.
for business.
So once employees start complaining, and it becomes a big deal for employee that they don't want to use that product anymore, and it start creating problems for the business of the company, they'll start looking into it seriously. They'll start putting budget into it.
And on that note, like, do you have any sort of suggestions or advice for people who are designing B2B products? What can they do better in their designs?
So there is no like journal advice to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
It is just at the end of the day, it's just design, right? All the principles are there, everything applies. It will depend on your scenarios and everything, that this can change. Like one or two advice that I usually tell every time somebody is, say, uh, if some new person is coming and they are not from B2B industry, I say don't reinvent the whole thing, right? Try to work around the existing processes. Like that's one big mantra.
That's a great advice, by the way.
Yeah. So thanks. So yeah, that helped me a lot, right? That's like one big general advice I can give.
No, you know what you said actually makes a lot of sense because I remember back in the days when I was working on a B2B tool, one mistake that I had actually made in my process was thinking, hey, let's make everything minimal, let's make everything look nice. It will for sure help the users, only to realize that that wasn't even needed. So we had to really understand कि कहाँ effort डालना है, कहाँ नहीं डालना है. You know, like you correctly mentioned, sometimes using what exists and using those mental models become like a really big
Yeah,
part of
just
it.
think of it like this: you do control C and control V all the day. If मैं control C और control V को switch कर दूँ, how frustrating it would be for you.
Oh my god, that would be a disaster. Now I can imagine the plight of my users. No, that is a very good example. That's a very good way to put it. So then how do you understand what are the areas to keep as is and what are the areas where there is a scope of change?
Again, it depends. Like you talk to your user, how they are doing those things, right? And then you see how your platform fits into that,
Right.
right? If something is very synonymous to your user's process, right, I
Right.
would say keep it. Don't
Right.
change it drastically, or just improve it slightly. And something which is not synonymous to your users, right, and creating lots of issues, improve on those areas. Take cues from your user, how they would like to do it, right? There are different things you can do for to analyze that.
Right. Yeah. That actually again makes a lot of sense to what you're saying. I also want to understand, how do you deal with extremely complex problems when they come into play? Like, you have to deal with numbers or a lot of data that comes into B2B, right? In most cases, you have a lot of data, and yet you have to find that sweet spot where you have to consider your users' needs. You have to also deliver a good design while not compromising on the data.
When you say data, can you elaborate a little bit what you mean by that?
Yeah. So, what I mean by that is, when it comes to, for example, the B2B industry, right? We use content that can be squished. We can always cut down on the content if we feel it's a lot. But when we're talking about B2B industry, we use real time numbers, we use real time
Okay, so
options,
you
right?
mean the amount of information that is being
Yes, yes.
displayed at a given point of time,
Right,
right?
exactly.
I was reading something, it was like something for dashboard, and it was like ink to screen ratio, right? And how do you utilize that? So
And what do you mean by that?
it's as simple as how much information or how much content you are providing in one viewport of the screen. And idea is not to maximize that, right? Idea is to have a good ratio, right? That you're not leaving your screens empty like how a normal website or a B2C design is. You utilize that space effectively, but also remove any information that you can remove from there and put it behind. The technical term for that would be information scent. You can smell the information kind of a way, and you can follow it, right? And you can achieve it there.
It feels like a foodie who's hungry for food.
Yeah. So it's like you give just a little bit of important information in the front, and then user always know I can always get that information if I just dig a little bit deeper. So that's one way to do
Right.
it. And then of course it depends on how your user process that data. That in some cases we try to hide the data and make it very simple and minimalistic, but in some use cases they need a lot of data upfront side by side, like how we do in Excel sheet,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
To make a decision.
Right. Yes,
So
yes,
there you will have to
absolutely.
find a hybrid solution how you can achieve that thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So it goes both way.
And since you mentioned about keeping data side by side and like allowing users to kind of compare it, so to say, there is a common notion with people, like people who haven't heard of what B2B designs exactly are, who haven't had a chance to look into it. They have this common notion that maybe B2B is all about dashboards. Is that the case?
I would say dashboard is the pinnacle of B2B, right? And B2B can be known for its dashboard. It's the face of it, right? But when you go into a platform, everything is not dashboard. You
Right.
have
Yeah.
other things as well, right?
Yeah.
Everything can't be on dashboard.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Just like in any B2C app, there is a landing page, but landing page is not the all that app has to offer.
Yeah.
It's somewhere you start.
Yep.
Same is with the B2B. You have lots of complex functionality hidden inside and everything. Just giving you a very simple example, right? We as a designer use Figma. Do you know your landing page? Do you know your dashboard for Figma?
Yeah.
But you don't see that often.
Yeah.
Most of the times, you have
You're in the
your
file
file
instead.
open
Yeah.
and you close your laptop and next day you open from there.
Yeah.
And it can be weeks, not if months, since you see your Figma dashboard.
It is true. Yeah.
Right? So dashboard is not all it is there to B2B product. There are lots of things. And many people, and especially in B2B, most of the time don't visit dashboard at all. They have their URL logged. They just go straight down there and start working.
Since you were throwing this kind of light on dashboards in a certain way, I also want to take a step back and really ask you to help me break down what a dashboard is according to you.
The project that I am working on currently, over here we had this very interesting way. We have landing pages, not a landing page, landing pages. Each
Okay.
module has its own landing page. It lands there and it has all to do with that module. But then everything is combined and put into a dashboard. If I take that concept in terms of car, you are driving car, you have dashboard in front of you, right? So all the things you need to access quickly are there, but not everything is there.
Right.
So while you are driving, whatever you need is there on the dashboard. But then there are a lot of things which are hidden behind, which are not there but you don't need them at the time of driving. So dashboard is kind of like similar concept, that when you reach a page, when you have one page where you concentrate all the information and give an overview.
So basically, an overview of an information is pretty much what a purpose of a dashboard
Most of the
is.
time, like not always, it will depend, but most of, like say 90% of the time, it starts with that notion.
All right. And have there been times where you've design of a dashboard in a slightly different light than just the way we discussed?
Not in completely different lights, but a dashboard serves different purpose, right? Sometimes it can be analytical dashboard, like there are types of dashboards. So analytical dashboard have lots of graphs, lots of data floating around and everything. Sometimes it can be an operational dashboard, like your CRM. There are lots table data is there and you take actions, lot of those, right?
Right, yeah.
So there are different kinds of dashboards that can be there, and their purpose are different. So depending on how you are designing and what the purpose of that dashboard, it differs very much.
Also, I just want to take a step back and try to understand when somebody's starting out in a B2B industry, what can they expect of this industry?
So first, I would say do not be afraid to take up some new challenges. Like, say if you are a designer who have been working for some time and you have a set notion that this is how I'm going to work. I'd say go explore, dig the data, ask lots of question. Why I need to do it like this? Why this is making sense and we are not doing it this way?
Yeah.
Right? And once you start asking question, and every B2B product is like very unique in its own way, right? Because there is not set template for a B2B product, right?
Yeah.
So every time you go dig deeper, and you'll have lots of functionalities to explore and interconnectedness. So you explore all those things, right? And you will find that it is lot more interesting than just looking at pixels.
That's actually something very interesting, that you mentioned in last couple of things that we discussed, where how dashboard works and how somebody joining the industry should ask the right questions in order to move forward, and how it's not really about us but about the person we are designing for, and we should not just abruptly change things like that command C becomes command V all of a sudden. In the end, I just also want to understand, so I'm sure you're a senior designer, so you have had a chance to look at portfolios of people, right? And probably you have even hired some of the designers in your team. So when you look at these portfolios, what are the kind of case studies do you look forward to? And what should a good case study for a B2B sector should hold?
I have gone through hundreds of portfolios, and what I dread for is to have at least one case study at there. Most of the designer do not attach case study at all. I always go to any resume, I read the name, don't look at anything else. I find like where can I find link to a case study, or maybe Behance or Dribble, where I can see the work of this person. And most of the time I do not find that, and I straight away reject that person. Second part, when I go to a case study and I click over there, I want some explanation to be there. See, as a recruiter, you don't want much, right? You don't want the best and beautiful case study, but you want some insight of some work that person has done.
Right,
Right?
yeah.
So you can have an idea like what kind of conversation I can expect from this person, right? What kind of work this person is doing or has been doing, right? So when you ask that person for an interview, you have at least some base to connect with that person and start the
Yeah.
conversation from there.
Even some interesting insights they have gathered, and why they took some decisions in the
Yeah,
first place.
yeah.
What was their thought process
Yeah.
like?
So
Right?
I want something to be there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I can start the discussion, have those things, right? A well put case study is like, you can
It's
say
like a dream you
yeah,
would
it's
have
like a
to
dream
see.
come true, right? I found it once. A person has created a Google slide of his case study intro, and I was very happy.
Finally, that case study
I
that you
like
want to see.
I so wanted to hire that person on the spot.
Wow, that's amazing. So, what did that person do differently compared to other people that you've
He
seen?
was, first of all, he had a case study. Right? Second, instead of in a long textual format and everything, like we are designers, we always say like, right, that make it easy for the user, right? He made it really easy for me to go through his case study.
Wonderful.
He had nicely described everything in pointers, first of all, so I didn't had to read much. He had
Yeah.
all the critical visuals placed there. He didn't have ton of user flow or ton of sketch there. He had very concise, a few little key items there, which gave me an insight like, okay, this is the work that has been done. He just had like 2-3 key screens which were being presented.
Wonderful. Okay, and you mentioned that this person has shared just the right amount of pictures, just the right amount of information. That's something that I see a lot of people struggle with, because when you deal with complex problems, especially with the nature of a B2B industry or even something around those lines, it's very difficult to decide what is important, what should I keep, and what should I, remove. So then, as someone who looks at these case studies, what do you think is the right decision making format for this kind of a question that they face?
Interestingly, I seen another case study. I was not interviewing the guy, I was looking for some case studies, and I saw a case study by a designer who worked on teams, redesigning of teams. And he had a very elaborate case study.
Yeah.
But it was very interesting, right? Every bit of information that was there was meaningful. It was not there just for sake of, extending the length or XYZ. It was really required to put that information so he can put forward his, idea, his thought properly. So the right amount of length or right amount of it depends on how much content you have, right? I can keep on talking about the same point for 5 minutes, or I can end it in one sentence. It depends how much I want to speak and how much I want to convey, right?
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. It's never about the length so much, but about the narrative and the way you are expressing that. Is the recruiter interested? Is that person having fun while going through your case study? Are they
Again,
involved in the process?
if we are having a very interesting conversation for 1 hour,
Yeah.
it is easier to sit and listen. And if we are a very
this
boring, very boring conversation, even like 5
have
minutes
been
is like
losing off
dreadful,
right
right?
now. Yeah. No.
Yeah. So it's like that.
Absolutely. On that note, since we have had an interesting conversation, I think now is the right time. Otherwise, you would be dozing off here.
Yeah, I'll jump out of this window.
So thank you so much for all these insights. I think it was a power-packed conversation. I have learned a lot in this conversation, and I got to reflect back on a lot of experiences back when I was working on B2B products and in the industry. So it's always a pleasure having you in the studio. Thank you so much for taking out time.
Thank you for having this podcast.